to the God Conclusion. I'm your host, John Leonard. Welcome to another episode of the God Conclusion. Today, my guest is John Burgstiner, who is, I'm going to say, President, CEO, Emperor of Logos Nutritionals, and now about to be the author of a book titled Nurturing Your Bioterrain. And we were going to talk about the book today and your business. First, I want to talk to you about the business because the name of your business is Logos Nutrition or Logos Nutritionals.
Yes.
And how did you come up with that name?
Very interesting question. Thank you for asking that because it's something near and dear to my heart. And I've been studying God's Word and teaching God's Word for probably 5 decades now. And as I taught through the first time the Gospel of John, I was confronted with this word, logos, and it's the Greek translation of the word. And in the beginning of John's Gospel, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, the Word was with God. Nothing that was made was not made by him. And in verse 14, it goes on to say that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, but we recognized him not. So to the people that John was addressing, the Greek-speaking people, they knew very well who the Word was. The Logos to them was the agent of creation that created all things and holds all things together. Remember, they were a polytheistic culture, but they had this concept of the Logos, which was the agent of creation that held all things together. And he was telling them that, yes, that is God, and he became flesh and dwelt among us, and you recognized him not. So the Logos is the agent of creation that holds all things together. And for me, I wanted to, in every way, for my company to be his and a reflection of him in terms of our interactions with people, that we could literally be his hands and feet in this world to the degree that we can. And that's why I named the company Logos Nutritionals, or as we call it, more Americanized, Logos Nutritionals.
For the benefit of the listeners, I'm going to take a step back and talk a bit about the history of the God Conclusion. As everybody knows, we have this podcast called The God Conclusion, which came about as a promotion of sorts of the Facebook page called The God Conclusion, which was to promote the book I wrote called The God Conclusion. Had a really consistent naming convention there. And what I've described many times is the process by which I became a writer. As most people may know, The God Conclusion is a direct response to Richard Dawkins in his book, The God Delusion. And I was watching, or I should say, I had the television on in the background, and I was working on a business plan. And I've told this story a number of times now, and had the television on in the background and heard Richard Dawkins say those famous words that cars and computers were intelligently designed, but the human being was not. And it happened to be the business plan for Logos Nutritionals that I was working on at the time. So I had to connect with dots there.
There you go.
We go back a very long way, if listeners haven't figured that out already. And we won't go into our complete history because it goes back to high school. And let's just say that we probably did some things that we shouldn't have done back in those days.
You think?
I think. I seem to recall
relied heavily on God's grace, but
it was only by God's grace that you and I both graduated from Savannah Christian. I can guarantee you that, because you were crazy back then.
Yes, I was.
But you've settled down a little bit.
A little bit.
Before we get into the actual content of the book, I'm going to jump to the end and talk about, you have a product line that you call the Burgstiner Protocol. And I was curious as to why you chose that name as opposed to something that was related to logos or the creator or something of those things, because you do have nutritional products that come from God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do, and we absolutely want him to get all the credit every day and every interaction that we have. But the Burgstiner Wellness Protocol is named the Burgstiner Wellness Protocol because it is the legacy of my father. And my father was an OBGYN, board certified, just a brilliant physician and surgeon. He was way, way ahead of his time. He was preaching against white flour and white sugar back in the 60s, and very clearly saw where we were headed with the development of what I call the sickness industry. And that is the conglomerates, all the corporate conglomerates today that control our food and our medicine and everything else. It's very well thought out and well positioned to produce chronic illness that they can profit from. And so my father saw that way, way ahead of time, and was an outspoken critic of the sickness industry. He was someone who recognized very early on the whole concept of the biotrain. The first person I ever heard say the word biotrain was my father. And his total focus of his medical practice was, he had a motto that he told everybody that came in the door, and that is, if you maintain normal physiology, you can prevent pathology and disease. And that was the whole idea of his practice of medicine, is not to target a symptom with a drug that would mask that symptom and create a bunch of more symptoms. It was, what can we do to target the underlying cause of symptoms and actually bring about change and restoration and what help people back into what we call homeostasis, which is a kind of a state of balance in all the systems in the body. So this book and this company has always very much been, for me, the passion of carrying on with my father's legacy that he left in terms of the way he impacted people's quality of life for so long, for 4 decades in his medical practice. And he's still doing it today worldwide through his protocols.
Now, your father was a pioneer in the nutritional supplement business, but it wasn't necessarily something that he just stumbled upon. It was something that was born of necessity.
Absolutely.
He was actually diagnosed with hepatitis C, wasn't it?
It was actually B.
Hepatitis B.
Yes.
And he was unable to practice as an OBGYN while he had that diagnosis. Is hepatitis B known to be curable?
Back then it wasn't. Now they have drugs that will arrest the viral replication. But back then, when he seroconverted, it was considered big news. And for 8 years, he was a chronic active carrier of hepatitis B. And in his case, we didn't know it until his death, but he also had a genetic condition called hemochromatosis that makes you hang on to iron You can't excrete iron. Your body doesn't excrete iron well. And in most people, by the time they're teenagers, it's diagnosed, or at least young adults. But in my father, he was a lifelong blood donor. And so he didn't realize it, but he was treating himself for a genetic condition all his life by donating blood. That's the treatment for hemochromatosis. When he got hepatitis, he could no longer do that. So not only did he have chronic active hepatitis B for 8 years, but during that 8 years, he was building up his iron levels because he wasn't giving blood anymore. So it was a really bad combination. But even in spite of that, he seroconverted and went back to full-time practice delivering babies and doing surgery again. And he did that for another about almost 10 years. But his practice was transformed then because not only was he delivering babies and doing gynecologic surgeries, but he was inundated with people from all over the place with all kinds of immune dysfunctions. And so he did a lot of clinical research on his own in his practice using all kinds of nutritional combinations that he would test out in his patient practice to try to optimize all the different metabolic pathways and clear the detox pathways, eliminate nutrient deficits in the body, and all those things that our protocol now does that he had to work through over years of experimentation. And the thing that really sets him out and sets him apart, his contribution to medicine, if you will, is the use of glandular therapy, which in and of itself is nothing new. Glandular therapy is one of the oldest forms of medicine we know of. But the combination of glandular extracts with vitamins and minerals that act as cofactors in all these different enzymatic pathways, that's his contribution. And the thymic formula, which is the centerpiece of his protocol, that's what it is, a combination of all of those cofactors and nutrients and glandular extract from a cow's thymus. So the thymus gland is a gland under your breastbone that is the master gland of our immune system. You've heard of T cells. They call them T cells because they're derived from your thymus. And in an infant, the thymus is roughly the same size as the lungs. But as we age, the thymus shrinks and was for a long time thought to become thymic involution, or shrinkage was thought to mean that the thymus really wasn't needed anymore after we reach adulthood. But nothing can be further from the truth. The thymus is like the conductor of the orchestra. And it secretes proteins, hormone-like proteins that influence all the different types of immune cells to specialize and to do their thing. If you take out a healthy adult's thymus, they will develop AIDS-like symptoms because of immune insufficiency and the ability of the immune system to communicate effectively and do what it's supposed to do is very dependent on a healthy thymus.
I know from experience, from being your friend and being around your business, that you properly called the thymic formula the centerpiece of the protocol because it was the first product that your company developed years and years ago. And it was what helped your father heal himself from hepatitis B. I know that with the FDA, you have to be very careful. You can't use words like miracle drugs or miracle formulas, things like that. But it is truly remarkable to read the testimonials that you get from some of your customers that, quite frankly, have been suffering from what I would only describe as horrific illnesses and diseases. And this centerpiece of your protocol has helped them resume a normal life.
Sure. 100 years ago, when Louis Pasteur invented penicillin, it was a huge news. It was a big deal, obviously. Very important step in the development of what we look at as modern medicine. But Louis Pasteur had a major detractor named Claude Bernot. And Claude Bernot said that the pathogen is not the problem. The problem is in the terrain, in the body's ability to deal with that pathogen. And obviously, Pasteur won out, and we now have a system of medicine that is based on, as I said before, drugs that mask symptoms and cause more symptoms in the process, instead of drugs that target underlying causes of symptoms, or which really don't require drugs. We do that with nutrients and herbs and natural things that promote health in the body.
Well, that's a nice segue into a discussion of the book contents, because that was one of the questions I had, which was set up. I already knew the answer from reading it, that you did not invent the term bioterrain. That actually goes back to the days of Pasteur, does it not?
Yes, it does. It sure does.
And one of the first things that just jumped off the page at me when I was reading your book was, you said, in regard to the immune system, you said that the body wants to heal itself. And that exact phrase, almost verbatim, was once said to me by an orthopedic surgeon who had just put some pins and things into my hand to repair the damage that had been done. And I said something in one of the follow-up appointments, "Thanks for fixing me up." And he said, "I didn't really do anything. The body wants to heal itself."
Yeah.
It's a remarkable idea. And it tells us that these bodies, these organic engines that God has given us that we get to enjoy for some period of time, they are very complex systems that your book does go into detail, and to some extent, about how organs and bones all work together in this bioterrain that we call a body. We were saying that in the book, you talk about the body as a whole, the organs and the bones all working together as basically like an organic machine, or not just one system, but a multitude of complex systems that all interact and work together to make this machine that we call a body function properly. And you talk about the importance of eating well, having a balanced diet, lots of fiber, eliminating toxins, detoxification from your body by breathing, eating fiber, quality sleep. How important is it to get toxins out of our body on a regular basis?
It's incredibly important. We are, throughout our lifetime, we are accumulating toxins to the degree that we can't download those effectively. And so many people are walking around with toxic levels of mercury in their body because their fillings are leaching mercury into their body continuously. They might present to us with symptoms of chronic candidiasis, or candida, overgrowth of fungus in the body. And when you get someone off of sugar and all the things that feed into candida, they're struggling with it, and you get them with a Spartan approach to clean up their diet and everything, and they still can't get rid of it, it is always heavy metal toxicity, and they have to do chelation therapy to get the metals out of their system for them to be able to get out from under the overgrowth of fungus in the body.
What is chelation therapy?
Chelation therapy is a way of binding toxic metals or heavy metals and toxins out of the body. And chelation basically just means to combine something with a protein structure or an organic structure.
Is that like those foot pads? What's in those foot pads that you apply to the soles of your feet, and they supposedly leach out all these toxins?
Those are not really chelating. That's a topical treatment trying to draw toxins out of the body. And there's not consensus in the scientific world over the legitimacy of that procedure. I myself, I've looked at it, and I think you can use one of those machines without your feet in it, and the water will still turn color and do all the things that it does. The anodes that are in there that are reactive, that the chemical reactions that are taking place from, create some of the discoloration and things that take place. But no, I'm talking about utilizing in terms of natural things like cilantro, for example. Cilantro will bind heavy metals in the body and help you excrete them. It's just a way of grabbing a hold of a molecule that's noxious or toxic to the body and getting it out. We also use chelation to get things in. Magnesium, for example, what you couple magnesium with when you present it to the body makes a big difference as to what happens when it goes in. If you couple magnesium with citrate, for example, it will target the bowel and loosens your stools. If you target it with another intermediary like malate or aspartate or glycinate, it'll tend to target muscle. And so you can help people dealing with muscle cramps and muscle stiffness and so forth, putting magnesium malate into their system. And it's all about what you combine, how you present a nutrient and what it's attached to that the body can grab a hold of and utilize.
Fascinating.
Sure.
Now, in your book, you also talk about the importance of exercise. So my question there is, does golf count?
Absolutely, golf count.
it better, because that's my favorite form of exercise these days.
Yeah, me too, buddy. Exercise is just so critically important. It's stirring a drink or mixing something up. Our heart is a pump that circulates our blood throughout the body, but our lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. It's pumped when we move our bodies. So we are made to move. And without movement, our bodies start to shut down quickly. And that's why when people get old and they fall and break their hip and they stay in the bed, they just disintegrate. And the body is made to move. And exercise is a totally critical aspect of anti-aging for sure, but even just wanting to maintain where you are.
You talk about the importance of drinking a lot of water, and you recommend I think it's a half gallon a day, 8-ounce glasses, that's 64 ounces. I would drink even more than that in August. You talked about evaluating, forgive me for being a little graphic or crude or whatever, but evaluating your urine color to tell whether or not you're properly hydrated. Sure. And I noticed that after a couple of our golf outings, that the next day or so, that my urine had gotten much darker because of the dehydration. And then the last time we played, I drank several bottles of water while we were playing, and I didn't have that same negative effect of seeing the color indicator of dehydration. In the book, you talk about bone health, and you mention a number of important nutrients that we need to consume in our diet, like calcium, which I know you can get calcium from milk and cheese. But do you also mention nutrients like magnesium and silica? What foods are these nutrients found in?
Well, magnesium is found in meats and in nuts and some vegetables. But the thing is, we are, because of modern farming practices, commercial farming practices, and getting away from God's wisdom in terms of letting the soil lay fallow every 7th year and rotating crops and all those things that we don't do anymore, the levels of magnesium in the soil are woefully inadequate compared to what they were when you and I were kids. It's absolutely crazy. And so virtually everyone is magnesium deficient. And so when you look at my bone health product that is part of the protocol. For example, it's called Magnifical. It's the only bone health supplement that I know of that has no calcium in it. And the reason is most people are not calcium deficient. They are magnesium deficient. And when you're magnesium deficient, it totally disturbs calcium metabolism as well, because these two minerals are antagonistic and they work together in the body. If you are magnesium deficient, you cannot absorb calcium from your food effectively. You end up bringing calcium in and it gets precipitated into the soft tissues of the body. So you got bone loss happening over here while you're building up calcium in all the places of the body that you don't want it, in the soft tissues of the body. You have the development, any kind of degenerative illness that you want to look at, whether it's prostate cancer or whatever. Calcification is a major aspect of degenerative illness. So if you have a way to combat calcification in the body, that's a very powerful thing. And that's what Magnifical does. It's not that we're not getting enough calcium. It's that we can't utilize the calcium we're getting. And that's why osteoporosis is a rampant problem in our country. And it's because of the diet, which promotes acid in the body, acid waste in the body. And when you have acid waste in the body, what do? We recruit calcium out of our bones to extinguish those acids. And so that it promotes more bone loss, more calcification. It's an insidious cycle. So Magnifical has no calcium, but it has 3 different kinds of magnesium. I talked a little bit before about how different forms of magnesium target different systems in the body. And so it has several different forms of magnesium, along with all of the bone assimilation nutrients required to build bone. So we don't just build our bones, and when we're 18, our bones stop growing, they're done, and they're inactive and static. And nothing can be further from the truth. Bone remodeling takes place while we sleep every day, all of our lives. And so when a lady who's in her 50s goes to the doctor and has osteopenia, what do they typically do? They put her on a drug that will shut down the specialized cells in the bone that break down bone. They're called osteoclasts. So, ta-da, you're not going to have bone loss because your osteoclasts don't work anymore. Well, they don't work anymore for causing bone loss, but they also don't work anymore for bone remodeling. So, or for example, the pH of your blood, pH of your body goes like this. It's up and down all day long. But the pH of your blood is like this. It's in a very tight window. How do we maintain the pH of our blood? We have access to our bones, all those alkalizing minerals in the bones we can pull from to keep that pH level. You take drugs that shut down osteoclasts, you don't have that anymore. And that just ricochets through all the different systems in the body and all kinds of things. It's not just bones that it affects a lot of things. Hormones, it's just everything's connected. As you mentioned before, the bioterrain is not just one system, it's an interconnected system of systems where all the different systems in the body are communicating in harmony. That's where we want to try to get people back to, is where they're digesting food and assimilating nutrients again, and they're able to get rid of toxins that they're exposed to, that they produce themselves. We make endotoxins in our body all the time, just existing. But when your body is confronted with all of the cumulative toxicity that we're being exposed to in our country, it gets to be more and more challenging for our bodies to keep up. God made our bodies incredibly resourceful, and we're able to put up with a whole lot of punishment, as you and I discovered early on in our lives. But
I thought I'd be dead by 30.
We said that quite a few times.
Yeah, that was the old age.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, it's a lifelong struggle for our bodies to deal with all the chaos that we're confronted with. And we need help. The body's made to heal and it wants to heal, but it needs the right nutrients and it needs the right resources in order to do so.
All right. I'm going to have to revert to my cheat sheet here in a minute because I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. You've got a product called Magnifical, which I love that name. Of every product in your protocol, which is the complete thymic formula, essential omegas, essential flora, essential digestion, liver CS plus, those are all, they're good names, but they're not sexy names. Magnifical is a pretty sexy name, but it has no calcium in it. So I marvel at.
But when you take Magnifical, though, your body's ability to absorb calcium from your diet is restored. So even though
that's why the calcium is in the name.
Yeah, it's all about restoring calcium metabolism.
Fascinating.
So remember, calcium is supposed to be mostly in your bones and teeth. It is used a lot in other systems of the body. When your muscles relax, they relax because magnesium rushes into the cell, and they contract because calcium rushes in and displaces the magnesium in the cell. That's what activates a muscle, is literally calcium and magnesium. So when we say magnesium is a muscle relaxer, it actually is. It is the ultimate muscle relaxer.
Very good. Now, I'm going to have to say that there are a few phrases in the book that I seem to recall that you have in your history that you are a deacon in a Baptist church.
Yes, sir.
And this sounded a little new agey to me, where you said, let the harmonious dance between your mind, emotions, and the biotrain continue. And I thought, did he have a ghostwriter for that? And if it was, why wasn't I asked?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, I went back and forth in my mind over whether I wanted this to be a book aimed at believers or I just wanted it to be a book that really focused on more on, from a layperson's level on what the bioterrain is and how it's impacted by the choices that we make every day and how we can improve it. And I did not go deeply at all into the spiritual aspect of health and life and how important that is, but it is, obviously it is. But I was trying to focus with the book, keeping the message on the science part, just trying to give people an understanding of, what is the bioterrain and why is it important?
You're not limiting your audience. In the God Conclusion book, I tried to say, we put the Bible on the shelf and we just talk about the scientific evidence and use logic to apply logic to that evidence to understand it. So that if you don't want to call God, if you want to call God supernatural intelligence or the supreme being or whatever you want to call God, it doesn't matter because you need to understand that the alternative of no God, atheism, is not a logical solution to the existential questions.
Sure.
But I agree with you, and I took the same approach in my book that you took in yours of not preaching to the choir, but preaching to the masses.
Yeah.
And when you talk about stress management in the book, you talk about using yoga. And I've heard some Christians say yoga is a paying homage to a pagan religion. I recall when I took martial arts classes that the stretches that we were given were basically yoga exercises that we use to stretch our body. From my perspective, if you aren't worshiping this pagan deity, you're just stretching your body out.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot that goes along with the cultures that produce yoga, that are, I guess you'd call them Far Eastern cultures, but in religions. But that doesn't mean that the physical aspects of exercise that yoga involves are not really beneficial to the body, and they can be for sure. Flexibility is really important. As you're watching me try to hit a golf ball, it's flexibility is something to try to hang on to for as long as you can.
Absolutely. Now, you talked also about interconnectedness, and I just could not get it out of my head. That old jingle, the leg bone's connected to the shin bone. That's what you're talking about, though, isn't it?
It certainly is. All of the systems in the body are interconnected. They all communicate. And we have a nervous system controlled by the brain and that innervates the entire body. But that's not the limit of the communication going on. There's a lot of chemical communication happening, like I explained with the thymus gland, which is communicating with the body chemically through hormones and through protein and peptides, specialized peptides. So there's a lot of communication going on outside of the central nervous system and even the autonomic nervous system. There's a lot of other forms of communication in the body, and all of these different systems in the body are absolutely tied in together. If you have a problem in one area, it reverberates through the entire system. That's what we're trying to do, is help people know where are those points that we need to be aware of, and what are the things that we're doing that do compromise our health long term. Hopefully, we can help people to point them in the right direction so that not only they have a better quality of life for the time they're here, but hopefully a greater quantity of life as well.
Amen to that. Well, my last question to you for today is going to be about the release of your book. When do you anticipate that the book will be available, and what's the plan there?
The book is being launched on Amazon through the Kindle program. That happens on Tuesday. My understanding is that it takes up to 72 hours before the book will actually appear as available online or on Amazon. The book is we looked into it, and my desire was to set the price of the book to free for the launching, but we found that we can't do that. The minimum price they'll let us do it at is $2.99 unless we go into a different program. But that program locks us in for too long to just one platform. We want to be able to give the book away to customers and things like that. Anyway, the book is going to be $2.99 is the price on the book. We're very much looking forward to the feedback that we get from our customers and so forth. We'll be trying to reach out to our customer base and offer them incentives to review the book and so forth, because we want to get noticed on Amazon as much as possible. But any suggestions you have will certainly be appreciated in regard to that.
One thing that we're doing is we're releasing this podcast next Wednesday, so that's going to coincide with the drop of the book pretty well.
Should, yeah.
My overall take on the book is that it's common sense. You're not putting information out there that nobody's ever heard before, but you're putting it all together in one package and then giving them information and then a potential solution at the end of it, which is the Burgstiner Wellness Protocol.
Sure.
So I think that's very exciting, and I wish you the best of luck in this and much success.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, I didn't want to target scholars and physicians and go into the real fine detail of what the BioTrain is all about, because I didn't want to bore people to death. I really was trying to reach out to the layperson and help them understand better how their body responds to the choices that they're making, and how they can make better choices in the future.
Just in what you were saying about sleep, the importance of quality sleep. I'd noticed that for the last few nights, I've woken up and my back was super stiff, and I'd have to go downstairs and hang upstairs upside down on the inversion table, and then come up and get on the back roller for a while, and then I'd start to feel human. But last night, I got a really good quality night of sleep, and I feel like a different person today. I wish we were out there hitting golf balls right now, but it's about 100 degrees.
All the regenerative processes occur when we sleep. That's when our body shuts things down and goes into regeneration mode. It's very, very important to get your at least 7 hours of sleep a night.
Amen. Well, thank you, my friend. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to, hopefully we'll be able to get on the golf course later this week.
Sounds good.
Take
care.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to The God Conclusion. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to this channel. Join us again next week as we continue to seek truth. Quid est veritas.